There has always been talk that Final Fantasy XIV lacks content which acts as a bridge between the casual content and the more hardcore content. And I think normal raids are slowly but surely becoming that bridge. As a warning, you're about to listen to opinions from a self-proclaimed midcore player who likes to craft and gather, does extremes only if they look fun, and doesn't step a foot in Savage unless the glamours look good. Only to give up after floor 2 and wait for the tier to unlock. So with that in mind, let's talk about the new Shenzhen Arcadia Championship Cruiserweight tier raids. Starting by addressing the opening statement of the video, this new raid tier does not shy away from giving the more casual player base a little challenge, while also giving the more battle-hardened veterans an experience that doesn't make them fall asleep where they're standing. This is the first time in years where I see group after group vibing and people dying to mechanics in normal content even after the first 5 hours of the patch. Of course, like with anything in life, once you do these fights for multiple times, they start to become easier as you grow more used to the mechanics. But even so, when I first finished each floor, my reaction to the fights wasn't "this is easy" or "this is too hard." It was "this is fun." In fact, these fights were so much fun that I've been running them to get my weekly tomes, even though there are much more optimal ways of doing that. That is all to say, I believe these fights are at the almost perfect difficulty to keep scratching that itch for the so-called midcore players, while also working as a stepping stone for casual players to take their first steps into harder content, because these fights teach them the feeling of failing and trying again. Something that I feel has not been a part of the casual experience since Shadowbringers came out. I think these fights are very well balanced. The more experienced players will find these fights much easier, as tanks, healers and the DPS players will know to utilize their damage mitigations, while the more casual players might find it a bit more challenging, especially to stay alive, when they've always left the heavy lifting to healers, since there hasn't been much to lift in the first place. I also want to talk about the fights more specifically, with even more personal opinions. Starting with the dancing green, adorable bunny boy who hops like a frog and croaks like one too once I'm done with him. Hitting us with an absolute banger of a song, he hits us with a reminder that reading cast names is sometimes not optional. For an older player, deciphering the mechanics may come easy, but that does not make it any less fun, especially since the fight rewards you with feedback on how well you performed, while also letting you not only slay, but slay on the dance floor. Overall, I think this fight is the perfect first fight, not too hard, not too easy, and loads of fun nonetheless. Anyways, here's my personal ratings for this fight that no one asked for. Next up, Sugar Riot. Why would I play Splatoon when we have Splatoon at home? If Dancing Green reminded us to look at cast names, Sugar Riot reminds us to look at what the boss is doing, or in this case, painting. There's not much I can say about this fight, except that it's amazing. We get 3 different floor layouts with their own mechanics and all of them work very nicely. I didn't at any point feel like I was just waiting for something to happen, which also has been a bit of a problem with older fights. In fact, any downtime of not having to run around was well appreciated. And here's my ratings for this fight. I loved the feeling of going from, "Oh, there's a giant sinkhole in the middle of the painting," to, "Oh, there's going to be a giant sinkhole in the middle of the floor, isn't there?" And then it's time for the third fight, Brew the Bombinator. Honeybee Lovely ran, so Brew the Bombinator could walk. Walk into my life and destroy any self-confidence I had as a raider. I have no words to describe this fight, except this video probably would not exist without it. So, where do I start? If the first 2 fights reminded you to look at cast bars and what the boss is doing instead of your second monitor, Brew the Bombinator took those lessons and said, "This ain't no school, this is real life, and you are dead. You can turn off your second monitor now." Also ads in my normal raid, not a never heard before thing, but the use of them is awesome. I mean, come on, they all cast big AoEs that can be interrupted, but if you don't have any physical ranged players, only the tanks can do that, leaving 2 more AoEs to be dealt with. And let's be honest, how many times do we see players use interject and head graze in normal content? Also, I think the last time we used mobs as a shield to hide from damage was in Stormblood with the Rathalos trial. I was not expecting that at all. The first arena change is hilarious, because it has no indication it's going to happen. Everyone just flies to different directions before going, oh, there's another platform. There's a lot happening in this fight, and I think it's one of the best normal difficulty fights to introduce players to harder content. And failure, because wiping once or twice, or 7 times, is healthy and makes the feeling of success even sweeter. Here's my ratings for this fight. And lastly, Howling Blade. While not as challenging as Brood Abominator, which I think makes sense story-wise, it still boasts its own challenge with the stack markers. I have wiped in this fight most of the time because of people being too afraid to join stack if their health is not completely full, even if they have shields on. And the stack in this fight really hurt, with even one person missing. Otherwise, it's a solid fight. It doesn't have that many mechanics, and that makes it feel a bit repetitive, at least as DPS. But because of its simplicity, they can make the hits hurt harder, which I found enjoyable as a healer. Once people gear up though, I fear the fight will just feel repetitive when even the hits don't hurt that much, but that's for the future me to cry about. I really like the use of the falling towers mechanic. It's good fun because it's not an instant kill if you get hit by one, like in some other fights and Cold Saucer. Here's my ratings for this fight. So that's what I think about the new normal raid tier. This is the first raid tier that actually made me think about it on a bit deeper level. It wasn't just go in, kill boss, get loot, go out. Going in and coming out of each fight left me feeling great because they were so much fun. And I believe that's the best way to measure if content is good. Not the difficulty, but how fun it is. Since it's normal content that can be done in Duty Finder, I think it works as the perfect gateway to introduce the more casual players to content that is a bit harder, without needing any grand rewards to coax people into trying it. Speaking of rewards, not only do we have 4 completely different amazing songs that can drop as orchestrions from each fight, but the last boss drops Face Fear, an actual item you can use on your everyday clamors instead of just another minion to add to the pile. Needless to say, that makes me very happy as it gives me an excuse to queue back in even after getting the weekly rewards. I'm glad Final Fantasy XIV is finally starting to focus on making the normal content a bit more challenging, so it's not just something to do while looking at pictures of Limsa Mikotes on the second monitor. Please tell me what you thought about the new normal raids, whether it's about the fights or the vibes. Thanks for watching and have a great rest of your day.